Have you ever met someone who seems completely unshaken no matter what life throws at them? The meeting runs late, traffic is a nightmare, someone spills coffee on their brand new shirt, and yet, they just smile faintly, take a slow breath, and keep moving like nothing happened. They don't yell, they don't panic, they barely even frown. On the surface, they look like the calmest people on earth. But here's the question that keeps psychologists, neuroscientists, and honestly most of us up at night. Is that calm real? Or is it a mask? And if it is real, how did they get that way? Today we're diving deep into the psychology of people who are always calm on the surface. We'll explore what's really happening beneath that serene exterior, the different types of calm personalities, the childhood experiences that wire someone this way, the biological and neurological advantages they often have, the hidden costs most people never talk about, and finally, whether true unshakable calm is something you can actually learn, or if some people are just born with a quieter storm inside. Let's start with the most common assumption people make, that someone who looks calm all the time must be emotionally healthy, spiritually enlightened, or at the very least, extremely disciplined. That assumption is only half true. In reality, there are 4 major psychological profiles that produce this always calm on the surface phenomenon. And only one of them is genuinely healthy in the long term. Profile 1. The truly regulated. These are the people who have developed high emotional regulation through a combination of secure attachment in childhood, mindfulness practice, or sometimes just good genetic luck in the serotonin and GABA department. Their nervous system doesn't spike easily. When stress hits, their prefrontal cortex stays online, their heart rate barely climbs, and cortisol release is minimal. They feel the emotion, process it quickly, and let it pass without suppression or explosion. This is the calm we all secretly want. Profile 2. The frozen or dissociative calm. This one is much darker. These individuals learned very early, often before age 7, that showing big emotions was dangerous. Maybe a parent was explosive, unpredictable, or emotionally absent. The child quickly discovered that the safest strategy was to go still, quiet, and invisible. Over time, the brain automates this response. The body floods with opioids and dissociates slightly during stress, not enough to be obvious, but enough to create that eerie, flat calm. On the outside, they look serene. On the inside, they may not even feel the emotion at all, it's been walled off. Profile 3. The high-functioning repressor. These are often perfectionists, high achievers, and people with strong type A tendencies who have learned to repress anxiety rather than feel it. They're not dissociating, they're very much aware of the stress, but they've trained themselves to push it down so efficiently that even polygraph tests sometimes can't detect their anxiety. Research from the 1980s and 90s by Richard Dienspire and others showed that repressors actually have higher sympathetic nervous system activation than non-repressors, but lower cortisol because their body has learned to clamp down on the stress response. They pay for it later, usually with physical illness. Profile 4. The Stoic philosopher, learned calm. This is the rarest and most admirable version. Someone who consciously trained themselves over years using philosophy, meditation, cognitive reframing, or exposure to controlled stress. Think Marcus Aurelius, modern-day Navy SEALs who've gone through Hell Week, or long-term meditators whose brain scans show thickened prefrontal cortices and shrunken amygdalas. Their calm is real, earned, and flexible. They can turn it on or off depending on context. Now, let's go deeper into how these different types develop. Most people who are naturally calm on the surface had one of 2 childhood experiences. The first is the secure base childhood. These individuals had at least one caregiver who was consistently responsive when they were distressed. When baby cried, someone came. When toddler fell, someone comforted. This creates a neurological template. The world is safe enough, and my emotions are survivable. Over time, the vagus nerve gets stronger. That's the main nerve of the parasympathetic rest and digest system, and the default stress response becomes milder. The second, and far more common path, is the nothing I do matters childhood. These kids learned that showing distress made things worse. Maybe they were punished for crying, mocked for fear, or ignored completely. The brain adapts by building what psychologists call a low emotional expressivity style. Over decades, this becomes so automatic that even the person themselves believes they just don't get stressed. One fascinating study from University College London followed 200 people from birth to age 45. They found that the children rated as most inhibited or most placid at age 3 were the most likely to have flat affect and low emotional expressivity as adults, regardless of how stressful their adult lives became. So biology and early environment set the stage. But what's actually happening in the brain and body of someone who never seems to lose their cool? Let's talk neurochemistry. People with naturally calm surface presentation often have higher baseline GABA activity, the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter. Think of it as the brakes on anxiety. More efficient serotonin transport, less prone to rumination, a stronger vagal tone, better parasympathetic recovery after stress, lower resting heart rate variability in the high-frequency band, meaning their body doesn't overreact to minor stressors. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all calm-looking people have these advantages. The dissociative and repressor types often have the opposite: chronically elevated cortisol, higher inflammation markers, and hypervigilant amygdalas. Their calm is effortful. It costs them. In fact, one of the biggest myths about calm people is that they're healthier. Research tells a different story. A famous 30-year longitudinal study out of Yale found that men who showed the least emotional expressivity in college, rated by interviewers as calm, composed, unemotional, had significantly higher rates of heart disease and cancer by age 50, even when controlling for smoking, diet, and exercise. Why? Because suppression has a metabolic cost. Every time you clamp down on an emotion instead of feeling and releasing it, your body stays in low-grade fight or flight longer than necessary. Blood pressure stays elevated. Immune function dips. Telomeres shorten. The body keeps the score even when the face doesn't. Now, I want to pause here and address something important. If you're watching this and thinking, "That's me, I never get upset, I'm always calm," ask yourself two questions. When I'm alone and something bad happens, do I still feel calm? Do I actually feel my emotions in my body, or do I mostly think about them in my head? If the answer to both is, "I stay calm even alone," and "I don't really feel much in my body," you might be in the dissociative or repressor category, not the truly regulated one. And that's not a judgment. It's information. Because the good news is, even if you weren't born with the calm gene, and even if your childhood taught you to freeze instead of feel, neuroplasticity is real. You can rewire this. But before we get to how, let's talk about the hidden downsides that calm people rarely admit, even to themselves. First, relationships. People who are always calm on the surface often struggle with intimacy. Why? Because emotional attunement requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires emotional range. If you only have one volume setting, quiet and composed, your partner eventually feels like they're living with a statue. I've worked with countless couples where the calm partner is genuinely baffled when their spouse says, "I never know what you're feeling." The calm person responds, "But I tell you I'm fine." And they are, on the surface. But underneath, there's often a reservoir of unprocessed grief, anger, or fear that never gets aired. Second, decision-making. Excessive calmness can lead to emotional flatness, which impairs motivation. When nothing feels particularly urgent or important, procrastination creeps in. The truly regulated calm person can access excitement and passion when needed. The frozen or repressor type often can't. Third, physical health. We already mentioned the heart disease and cancer correlations. And fourth, perhaps the most painful, the loneliness of never being fully seen. Because when you never let the storm show, people assume there is no storm. And when they assume there's no storm, they stop offering shelter. So how do you know if your calm is healthy or harmful? Here are 5 signs of healthy calm. You feel emotions in your body, but they don't overwhelm you. You can access anger, sadness, or joy appropriately when the situation calls for it. Your close relationships feel emotionally rich, not just stable. You have moments of playfulness, silliness, or strong passion. Calm isn't your only setting. When you're alone, you still feel alive, not numb. If those don't describe you, don't despair. Here's what actually works to move from suppressed calm to regulated calm. First, and this is non-negotiable, you have to learn to feel your body again. Most chronically calm people live in their heads. They intellectualize emotions rather than feel them somatically. Start with simple body scans, 5 minutes a day, noticing sensation without judgment. Over time, this rebuilds the interoceptive pathways that got shut down in childhood. Second, practice emotional granularity. People who say, "I'm fine," all the time usually have a very small emotional vocabulary. Start labeling feelings with more precision. Not stressed, but tight chest, racing thoughts, clenched jaw. The more specific the label, the less overwhelming the feeling becomes. Third, controlled stress exposure. This is what the Stoics did, what seals do, what long-term meditators do. Deliberately put yourself in situations that trigger mild to moderate anxiety, public speaking, cold showers, difficult conversations, and practice staying present with the discomfort instead of shutting it down. Over time, your window of tolerance expands. Fourth, attachment repair. If your calm comes from early neglect or trauma, working with a therapist trained in somatic experiencing, EMDR, or internal family systems can be life-changing. The goal isn't to become more dramatic, it's to become more alive. And finally, cultivate meaning. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps while maintaining an almost supernatural calm, didn't do it by suppressing emotion. He did it by connecting every moment of suffering to a larger purpose. When your life has deep meaning, the waves don't need to be fought, they can be surfed. So where does this leave us? The people who are always calm on the surface are not all the same. Some are emotional ninjas who have mastered their inner world. Some are emotional ghosts who disappeared from their own feelings long ago. And some are works in progress, carrying the seeds of true calm beneath years of protective ice. The difference isn't how they look on the outside. It's whether, when no one is watching, they can still feel the full range of being human, and choose peace anyway. Because that's the real secret. True calm isn't the absence of emotion. It's the presence of choice. Thank you for spending this time exploring the hidden world behind the calmest faces. If this resonated with you, whether you're the calm one or you love someone who is, drop a comment below. Have you ever wondered what's really going on behind that serene smile? Yours or someone else's? And if you want to go deeper into how to build real, flexible, alive calm, the kind that doesn't cost your health or your relationships, let me know. I read every comment. Until next time, stay curious about what's beneath the surface, especially your own.